Everyone thinks Donnie Brasco was just another undercover cop story, but the truth? It was the greatest and most heartbreaking infiltration in FBI history. A man lived as a mobster for 6 years. He made friends, he broke bread, he became family, and then he destroyed them all. But the real tragedy? The movie didn't show you the worst part, see? Hollywood gave you Johnny Depp looking cool in a leather jacket. They gave you Al Pacino being Al Pacino. They gave you a neat 2-hour story with a beginning, middle, and end. But they didn't show you Lefty Ruggiero sitting in his apartment at 3 in the morning, chain smoking, waiting for the bullet he knew was coming. They didn't show you Sonny Black handing over his jewelry before walking into the house where he'd be murdered. They didn't show you Joe Pistone's daughter asking why Daddy doesn't live with them anymore. The real story? It's not a movie, it's a tragedy. And today, you're going to hear all of it. Before we dive into this incredible true story, let me know, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more real mob stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. Now, let's go back to 1976. The year is 1976. Gerald Ford is president. America is still recovering from Vietnam and Watergate. People don't trust the government. And in New York City, the 5 Mafia families are making more money than ever before. The FBI has a problem. For decades, they've tried to bring down the mob. They've arrested low-level guys. They've flipped a few informants. But they can't touch the real power. The bosses, the captains. The made men who actually run things. Why? Because the Mafia is a closed society, you can't just walk in and join. You need to be Italian. You need to be vouched for. You need to prove yourself. And most importantly, you need to kill someone to get made. So the FBI has an idea, a crazy idea, an idea that could either destroy the Mafia or get their agent killed. They're going to send someone undercover, deep undercover, not for a few weeks or months, for years, as long as it takes. This agent will become a mobster. He'll commit crimes. He'll make friends with killers. He'll live the life, and then, when he's deep enough, he'll bring the whole thing down. There's just one problem. Finding the right guy. Enter Joseph Dominic Pistone. Joe Pistone was born September 17, 1939. In Erie, Pennsylvania. His parents were Italian immigrants. His father worked on the railroads. They were working-class people, honest people, the kind of people who believed in America and hard work and doing the right thing. But Joe grew up around Italians. He spoke Italian at home. He understood the culture, the customs, the way Italian men talked and acted. He knew how to cook Italian food. He knew the old country stories. He knew how to be Italian in a way that mattered. In 1969, Pistone joined the FBI. He was smart, dedicated, and he had something most FBI agents didn't have. He looked Italian, really Italian. Dark hair, dark eyes, the kind of face that could be from Sicily or Naples or Calabria. The kind of face that wouldn't raise questions in a room full of mobsters. By 1974, Pistone had already done some undercover work. Small stuff, drug cases, truck hijackings. He was good at it, really good. He could think on his feet. He could lie without blinking. He could become someone else. That's when the FBI approached him with the operation. They sat him down in a conference room in Manhattan. There were supervisors there, case agents, guys who'd been chasing the mob for 20 years, and they laid it out for him. "We want to infiltrate the Bonanno family," they said. Pistone knew what that meant. The Bonanno family was one of the 5 families that ran New York. They controlled unions, construction, restaurants, gambling, loan sharking, drug trafficking. They made millions. And they killed anyone who got in their way. How long? Pistone asked. As long as it takes. Could be a year, could be 5 years, could be longer. What's my cover? You're Donnie Brasco. You're a jewel thief from California. You're good with stones, diamonds, emeralds, rubies. You can tell the real from the fake. You're looking to fence stolen goods and make connections in New York. Pistone thought about it. He thought about his wife, Maggie. He thought about his 3 daughters. He thought about missing birthdays and Christmases and school plays. He thought about lying to his family for years. He thought about the danger. Then he said yes. The preparation took months. Pistone had to become Donnie Brasco completely. That meant learning everything about jewels and gems. The FBI brought in experts. Pistone studied. He learned how to grade diamonds. He learned how to spot fake stones. He learned the language of the jewelry business. He learned how to talk about carats and clarity and color. But that was just the surface. The real work was deeper. Pistone had to become a convincing criminal. That meant understanding how criminals think, how they talk, how they move, how they do business. The FBI showed him files on jewel thieves. He studied their methods. He memorized their territories. He learned which fences operated where. They created a complete fake background for Donnie Brasco. Arrest records in California. Associates who could vouch for him. A paper trail that would hold up if anyone checked. The FBI even set up fake businesses that Donnie had supposedly worked with. But here's what people don't understand about undercover work. It's not just about memorizing a story. It's about becoming that person. Pistone had to think like Donnie Brasco, react like Donnie Brasco, live like Donnie Brasco. And he had to be willing to do things that FBI agents don't normally do. The FBI made it clear. Pistone would have to commit crimes. Not murder, they drew the line there, but other crimes. He'd have to help fence stolen goods. He'd have to participate in illegal gambling. He'd have to be present when crimes were discussed and planned. Because if he didn't, the mobsters would know something was wrong. Pistone understood. To catch criminals, he'd have to become one, at least on the surface. There was one more thing. One crucial thing that would determine whether this operation succeeded or failed. Pistone had to be willing to make friends with these men. Real friends, not just pretend friendships. He had to eat with them, drink with them, laugh with them. He had to care about their problems. He had to be someone they could trust with their lives. Because that's how the Mafia works. It's not a business, it's a family. A twisted, violent, criminal family, but a family nonetheless. These men don't trust easily. They've seen rats before. They've killed rats before, so to get close, Pistone would have to be more than just a good liar. He'd have to make them love him. And then he'd have to betray them. In early 1976, Joe Pistone said goodbye to his family. Not forever, but for a while. He told his wife what he could, which wasn't much. The operation was classified, top secret. Even she didn't know all the details. His daughters were young. They didn't understand why Daddy was going away. They just knew he had to work. Pistone packed a bag. He put on his Donnie Brasco clothes, casual, working class. The kind of stuff a jewel thief would wear. He checked his cover story one more time, and then he walked out into New York City. Joe Pistone, FBI agent, was gone. Donnie Brasco had just been born. Now here's the crazy part. Pistone didn't just walk into a mob social club and introduce himself. That's not how it works. You can't just show up and say, "Hey, I want to join the Mafia." They'd laugh you out of the room. Or worse, no. Pistone had to work his way in slowly, very slowly. He started in the places where mobsters did business. Bars in Little Italy, social clubs in Brooklyn, restaurants where wise guys met. He'd sit at the bar, order a drink, strike up conversations. He wasn't pretending to be a mobster. Not yet. He was just Donnie Brasco. A guy who dealt in stolen jewelry. A guy looking to make connections. A guy who knew how to keep his mouth shut. And slowly, very slowly, people started to notice him. The FBI had set Pistone up with a cover team. These were other agents who would support the operation without blowing his cover. They provided surveillance. They documented meetings. They made sure Pistone didn't get killed. But Pistone was mostly on his own, walking into rooms full of killers, making small talk with made men, hoping nobody asked the wrong question. Previous undercover operations had failed. Some agents got caught and had to be pulled out quickly. Some got beaten, and some just disappeared. The mob doesn't play games. If they suspect you're law enforcement, you're dead. Simple as that. Pistone knew the risks. But he also knew this was the chance to do something no one else had ever done. To get inside the Mafia, to see how it really worked, to bring it down from the inside. All he had to do was survive and find his way in. That's where the story really begins. Because in a bar in Little Italy, in the summer of 1976, Donnie Brasco was about to meet the man who would change everything. The man who would become his best friend. The man he would eventually destroy. His name was Benjamin Ruggiero, but everyone called him Lefty. Before we talk about Lefty, you need to understand what the Mafia actually was in 1976. Forget what you've seen in movies. Forget the glamour and the respect and the power. Let me tell you what it really was. The American Mafia, specifically the New York Mafia, was divided into 5 families. Think of them like corporations. Except instead of selling products, they sold protection, ran illegal gambling, controlled unions, and killed people who didn't pay. The 5 families were: the Gambino family, the biggest and most powerful, run by Paul Castellano in 1976, though Carlo Gambino had just died. They controlled construction, trucking, and the waterfront. The Genovese family, the most secretive. They stayed out of the spotlight, run by Frank Fonzie Thierry. They controlled labor unions and Wall Street. The Lucchese family controlled the garment district and the airports, run by Anthony Tony Dux Corallo. The Colombo family, smallest of the 5, still recovering from internal wars, run by Carmine Persico. The Bonanno family, and here's where our story lives. The Bonanno family in 1976 was a mess, an absolute disaster. And that's exactly why the FBI chose to target them. See, in 1964, the boss of the Bonanno family, Joseph Bonanno himself, tried to kill the other bosses and take over all of New York. It didn't work. He got exiled. The family was put under the control of a commission of the other families. It was humiliating. By 1976, the Bonannos were the weakest of the 5 families. They were disorganized, they were making less money, they had internal problems. Guys were fighting over territory. The leadership was unstable. For the FBI, this was perfect. A weak family meant less security. It meant guys were desperate. It meant they might take chances they wouldn't normally take. Like trusting a jewel thief from California named Donnie Brasco. But Pistone still needed a way in. You don't just walk into the Mafia. You need what's called an in. Someone to introduce you, someone to vouch for you. Pistone started hanging around a place called Casa Bella Restaurant on Mott Street in Little Italy. This wasn't a mob headquarters or anything dramatic. It was just a place where connected guys sometimes ate, where they did business, where they met. Pistone would sit at the bar, order food, be friendly, but not too friendly. He'd mention casually that he dealt in jewelry, that he could move hot stones, that he knew people in California. And he waited. In the criminal world, people talk, word gets around. There's a guy at Casa Bella. Says he's a jewel thief. Seems legit. Knows his stuff. One of the people who heard about Donnie Brasco was a low-level associate named Anthony Meera. Now, Meera was not a good guy. Even by mob standards, he was a vicious, violent, unpredictable psychopath. He'd beaten people half to death for looking at him wrong. He was feared, not respected, but Meera was connected to the Bonanno family, and he was always looking for ways to make money. Meera approached Pistone in September 1976. Started talking to him, feeling him out. Pistone played it cool. He didn't seem too eager. He didn't ask about the mob. He just talked about jewelry and business. Meera liked him, or at least, Meera saw an opportunity to make money off him. This is important. Meera wasn't trying to be Pistone's friend. He was trying to exploit him. In the mob, everything is transactional. Friendship means, what can you do for me? Through Meera, Pistone met other low-level guys. Bookmakers, loan sharks, guys who ran gambling operations. He'd help them fence jewelry. He'd provide his expertise on gems. He'd make himself useful, but Pistone still wasn't inside. Not really. Meera was too unstable, too violent, too unpredictable. If Pistone was going to really infiltrate the family, he needed someone better, someone more connected, someone who would actually trust him. Now, while Pistone was working his way into the Bonannos, there was a war happening in the mob. Not in New York, in Milwaukee. But it would end up mattering a lot to our story. In the mid-1970s, the Milwaukee Mafia was having internal problems. Guys were fighting over control, and in 1976, a mobster named August Maniaci got into a dispute with the Milwaukee boss, Frank Balistrieri. The Milwaukee family was actually under the Bonanno family's umbrella. They reported to New York, so when things got violent in Milwaukee, it affected the Bonannos. Why does this matter? Because it created chaos, confusion, opportunity, the kind of environment where a skilled undercover agent could slip through the cracks. Pistone was building his reputation slowly. He was patient. He didn't push. He let relationships develop naturally. This is what separates good undercover agents from great ones. Patience. Hollywood shows you undercover cops who immediately start asking questions about crimes and bosses and operations. In reality, that would get you killed instantly. Mobsters are paranoid. They're suspicious. They've been dealing with law enforcement their whole lives. They can smell a cop a mile away, so Pistone never asked questions. He just listened. He was helpful. He was reliable. He was a guy who could be trusted with small things. And slowly, those small things became bigger things. He'd help move some stolen merchandise. He'd provide cover for a meeting. He'd be a familiar face in the background. He wasn't trying to be a big shot. He was just Donnie, the jewel guy. By late 1976, Pistone had been undercover for about 9 months. He was known in certain circles. He had a reputation as a solid guy. But he still wasn't really inside. Then something changed. Anthony Meera introduced Pistone to another Bonanno associate. A soldier. A guy who'd been in the life for 30 years. A guy who was old enough to be Pistone's father. A guy named Benjamin Ruggiero. Lefty. Now, before I tell you about Lefty, let me be clear about something. The Lefty Ruggiero you saw in the movie, Al Pacino's version, is not the real Lefty. Pacino played him as this sad sack. Sympathetic guy, a little slow, a little pitiful. The real Lefty Ruggiero was different. He was sharp. He was street smart. He was dangerous. He'd killed people. He'd survived in the mob for 3 decades. You don't do that by being stupid. But Pacino got one thing right. Lefty was desperate. And that desperation would change everything. When Pistone met Lefty in late 1976, Lefty was 56 years old. He'd been in the Bonanno family since the 1940s. He'd worked under every boss. He'd done every job. He put in his time. But he was still just a soldier. Not a captain. Not even a respected soldier. Just a worker bee. A guy who collected money for other people. A guy who ran errands. A guy who, after 30 years, was still broke, see? Here's what people don't understand about the mob. Most guys don't get rich. The bosses get rich. The captains make good money. But the soldiers? The foot soldiers? They work hard, they take risks, and they make just enough to get by. Lefty had been loyal his whole life. He'd never ratted. He'd never stolen from the family. He'd done what he was told. And where had it gotten him? Nowhere. He lived in a modest apartment. He drove a modest car. He was always hustling for money. Always looking for the next score. Always hoping this would be the opportunity that finally paid off. And then Donnie Brasco walked into his life. Meera introduced them at a social club in Little Italy. Pistone remembers the moment clearly. Lefty was wearing a nice suit. Not expensive, but clean and pressed. He had slicked back hair. He was smoking a cigarette. He looked Pistone up and down. "This is Donnie," Meera said. "The jewel guy I told you about." Lefty nodded. "You know diamonds?" "Yeah," Pistone said. "I know diamonds. Let me ask you something." Lefty said. He pulled out a ring, small diamond. "What's this worth?" Pistone looked at it. He'd been trained for this. He examined it carefully, held it to the light, checked the clarity. "It's real," Pistone said. "But it's small, maybe half a carat. Couple $100 retail. You could fence it for maybe $100. Lefty smiled. You do know your stuff. That was it. That was the moment. Lefty decided Donnie Brasco was legitimate. And more importantly, Lefty decided Donnie could make him money. They started working together, small jobs at first. Lefty would bring Pistone's stolen jewelry. Pistone would evaluate it, tell him what it was worth, help him sell it. Pistone was useful. And in the mob, if you're useful, you stick around. But something else happened. Something neither of them expected. They became friends, real friends. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Lefty Ruggiero was born Benjamin Ruggiero on April 19, 1926. In the Lower East Side of Manhattan, he grew up in the same neighborhoods where the Mafia operated, where made men walked the streets like they owned them. Because they did, Lefty joined the Bonanno family when he was young. Probably in his early 20s, he started as an associate, doing small jobs, collecting debts, running numbers, the usual entry-level mob work. He got his nickname, Lefty, because he was left-handed. Simple as that. In the mob, everybody has a nickname. Mostly they're not creative. Lefty was good at the work. He was reliable. He was smart enough to follow orders, and dumb enough not to ask questions. Perfect soldier material. He got made. Officially inducted into the family, probably in the 1950s. The exact date isn't clear, because the mob didn't keep public records. But once you're made, you're in for life. You're a full member. You can earn. You're protected by the family. But being made doesn't mean you're rich. Lefty made money. Sure, he had his operations. He had his weekly collections. He had his share of various rackets. But after he kicked up to his captain, and his captain kicked up to the boss, Lefty was left with the scraps. This is how the Mafia really works. It's not Robin Hood. It's not honorable. It's a pyramid scheme where the guys at the bottom do all the work and take all the risk, while the guys at the top get fat and rich. Lefty had been doing this for 30 years. He'd watched younger guys get promoted. He'd watched less talented guys become captains. He'd watched outsiders come in and make more money in a year than he'd made in a decade. And it ate at him by the time Pistone met him in 1976. Lefty was bitter, frustrated, still loyal to the family, but wondering what the hell he'd wasted his life on. He was also lonely. Lefty's wife had left him. His kids were estranged. He lived alone. He spent his days going from social club to social club, doing collections, running errands, hoping for a big score that would never come. When Donnie Brasco showed up, this young, energetic guy who knew how to make money, Lefty saw an opportunity. Maybe this kid could help him finally get ahead. But more than that, Lefty saw a friend. Someone who listened to him. Someone who respected him. Someone who made him feel important. Pistone understood this. Part of being a good undercover agent is understanding what people need. And what Lefty needed was someone to care about him. So Pistone became that person. They'd meet at Lefty's regular spots. Social clubs in Little Italy and Brooklyn. Places with names like the Motion Lounge and the Toyland Social Club. These weren't fancy places. They were small storefronts with folding chairs and card tables. Places where mobsters hung out during the day because they had nowhere else to go. Pistone would sit with Lefty for hours. They'd drink coffee, smoke cigarettes, talk. Lefty would tell stories about the old days. About bosses who commanded respect. About scores he'd pulled off. About guys who'd crossed the family and paid for it. And Pistone would listen. Really listen. He wasn't just gathering intelligence. Though he was doing that too. He was being a friend. Here's what the movie got right. Lefty really did take Donnie under his wing. He really did teach him the rules of the Mafia. How to act, how to talk, what to do and what not to do. Never say the word Mafia, Lefty told him. It's Cosa Nostra, our thing, that's what we call it. When you meet a made guy, you show respect. You don't talk unless you're talked to. You don't ask questions. You never, ever talk about family business outside the family. You don't tell your wife. You don't tell your girlfriend. You don't tell anybody. If someone introduces you to someone, that's vouching for you. If you turn out to be a rat, the guy who vouched for you gets killed too. That last rule? That was important. Because Lefty was vouching for Donnie Brasco. Lefty was telling other mobsters, "This guy is good. I trust him with my life." Literally, if Donnie turned out to be a cop, Lefty would be killed. That was the rule. That was how the Mafia enforced loyalty. By making everyone responsible for everyone else. Pistone knew this. The FBI knew this, and they went ahead anyway. Lefty and Donnie started doing jobs together. Small-time stuff at first, fencing jewelry, moving some stolen merchandise. Nothing that would make them rich, but enough to establish a pattern, enough to build trust. Lefty introduced Donnie to other guys in the family. Other soldiers, some associates. Slowly, Pistone's circle expanded. He wasn't just Lefty's guy anymore. He was becoming known. "This is Donnie Brasco," Lefty would say. "He's with me. He's a good kid." And because Lefty vouched for him, other mobsters accepted him. The FBI was recording all of this. Pistone wore a wire whenever he could. But you have to understand how risky this was. The mob had gotten sophisticated about surveillance. They'd pat guys down. They'd check for wires. If they'd caught Pistone wearing one, he'd have been dead on the spot. So sometimes, Pistone couldn't wear a wire. Sometimes he just had to remember conversations and report them later. Sometimes he'd go into meetings with made men, knowing he was completely on his own. No backup, no recording. Just his cover story and his ability to lie. The psychological pressure was enormous. Pistone was living a double life. During the day, he was Donnie Brasco, jewel thief and mob associate. At night, when he could sneak away, he was Joe Pistone, FBI agent with a wife and kids he barely saw. He couldn't tell his family what he was doing. Couldn't tell them where he was. Couldn't explain why he missed dinner again, or why he wasn't coming home again. His wife, Maggie, was holding the family together by herself, raising 3 daughters alone, making excuses to them about where their father was, lying awake at night, wondering if he was alive or dead. But Pistone couldn't break cover, not even for his family, because if the mob suspected anything, they'd kill him, and probably his family too. So he kept going deeper. Lefty and Donnie became inseparable. They'd spend entire days together. Lefty would pick Donnie up in the morning. They'd make rounds, visiting social clubs, checking on operations, collecting money. They'd have lunch at some Italian restaurant. They'd go to meetings, then they'd have dinner. Then they'd go to a club or a bar. Lefty was teaching Donnie everything. Not just the rules, but the culture. How to carry yourself. How to talk. What jokes were acceptable. What topics were off limits. "You never insult a guy's wife or kids," Lefty said. "You can insult him all you want. But you leave his family alone. You don't ask what another guy does. It's none of your business. You pay your debts on time. Always, you don't pay. You're disrespecting the guy you owe. And that can get you killed. You keep your word. You say you're going to be somewhere. You're there. You say you're going to do something. You do it." These weren't just rules. This was a code. A twisted criminal code. But a code nonetheless. And in the Mafia, the code was everything. Lefty also taught Donnie about the hierarchy. Who was who had power, who was just pretending to have power. The Bonanno family in 1976-77 was run by Philip Rusty Rastelli, but Rastelli was in prison. So the family was being run day to day by underboss Carmine Galante and various captains. One of those captains was Sonny Black Napolitano, and this is where things get interesting. Sonny Black was everything Lefty wasn't. He was powerful, respected, a earner. A guy on his way up. Sonny Black ran a crew in Brooklyn. He operated out of a place called the Motion Lounge on Graham Avenue in Williamsburg. This was his headquarters, his territory, his operation. Lefty was part of Sonny Black's crew. He reported to Sonny. He kicked up to Sonny, which meant Donnie, by extension, was also under Sonny Black. Pistone met Sonny Black in early 1977. It was a crucial moment. Sonny was suspicious of outsiders. He was smart, careful. If he suspected Donnie was a cop, it was over. They met at the Motion Lounge. Lefty brought Donnie in like he was presenting a prize pupil. "This is the kid I told you about. Lefty said. Donnie Brasco, he knows jewelry. He's a good earner. Sonny Black looked Pistone up and down. He was a big guy, intimidating. He had dark hair, dark eyes, and a face that didn't smile much. Lefty says you're good people, Sonny said. I try to be, Pistone said. You ever been arrested? This was a test. Pistone had memorized his fake record. Couple times in California, nothing serious. Fencing mostly. You do time? Little bit, county jail. Sonny nodded. This was good. A criminal record made you more credible. Cops don't have criminal records. Lefty vouches for you, Sonny said. That's good enough for me. But you fuck up, you disrespect, you bring heat on us. You'll answer to me, understand? I understand. And that was it. Sonny Black accepted Donnie Brasco. Which meant Pistone was now connected to a captain in the Bonanno family. Which meant he was deeper inside than any FBI agent had ever been before. But it also meant the stakes were higher, because Sonny Black wasn't just some street guy. He was a killer. He'd murdered people. And if he found out Donnie was a Fed, he wouldn't hesitate to kill again. The day-to-day life of a mobster isn't what movies show you. It's not constant action and violence. Most of it is incredibly boring. Pistone would spend hours just sitting around social clubs, drinking coffee, playing cards, listening to old men tell the same stories over and over. The social clubs were the center of mob life. Every crew had one. They were usually small storefronts with blacked-out windows. Inside, there'd be some chairs. Maybe a TV, a coffee pot, nothing fancy. This is where business was done, where collections were made, where orders were given, where murders were planned over espresso. Pistone documented all of it. The hierarchy, the operations, the money flows. He was building a case brick by brick, but he was also building friendships. Real friendships, and that was the hardest part. Lefty genuinely cared about Donnie. He'd call him multiple times a day. He'd worry if Donnie was late to a meeting. He'd defend Donnie to other guys. He'd share things with Donnie that he didn't share with anyone else. One night, Lefty and Donnie were having dinner at a restaurant in Little Italy. Lefty had been drinking. He got emotional. You know what kills me? Lefty said, I've been in this life for 30 years. 30 years, I've done everything they asked. I've been loyal. I never complained. And what do I got to show for it? Nothing. I'm still a fucking soldier. Still hustling for money. Still living in a shitty apartment. Pistone didn't know what to say. What do you say to that? He was an FBI agent. He was supposed to be gathering evidence, not providing therapy. But he was also a human being. And Lefty was his friend. Or at least, Lefty thought he was. It'll come around, Pistone said. You'll get your shot. Lefty shook his head. No, I won't. I'm too old. I missed my chance, but you're young. You're smart. You stick with me. I'll teach you everything. And maybe together we can make something happen. This is what broke Pistone's heart. Even years later, in interviews, he'd talk about this moment. About how Lefty believed in him, trusted him, loved him like a son. And Pistone knew that one day, he'd have to destroy him. But not yet. For now. He had to keep going deeper, because the operation was just getting started, and the worst was yet to come. If you're enjoying this real story, give this video a like. It helps more people discover the truth behind the Hollywood version. And believe me, what's coming next is going to blow your mind. Because we're about to talk about what Hollywood never showed you. The brutal reality of mob life, the psychological toll on Pistone, and the moment when everything started to fall apart. But first, let me tell you about something the movie completely glossed over. Now we need to talk about something the movie touched on, but didn't fully explain. What it means to be made in the Mafia. Being made is the ultimate goal for any mob associate. It's like getting tenure at a university, except instead of job security, you get the right to kill people without asking permission first. When you're made, you become a full member of the family. A soldier, you can earn. You're protected if someone kills you. The family avenges you if you have a beef with another made guy. It goes to the boss to settle. You can't just get whacked without permission from the top. But there are rules, strict rules. First, you have to be Italian, full Italian, both parents. This isn't racism exactly, it's security. The mob figured that Italians were less likely to be undercover cops and more likely to understand the culture. Second, you have to be proposed by a made guy. That made guy is vouching for you with his life. If you turn out to be a rat, he gets killed too. Third, you have to prove yourself. You have to be a good earner. You have to show loyalty. You have to follow orders without question. And fourth, this is the big one. You have to kill someone. This is the rule that kept Pistone from getting made. The FBI drew a hard line. Pistone could not participate in a murder. They weren't going to have their agent actually kill someone just to maintain his cover. But this created a huge problem, because as Donnie got closer to the family, as he proved himself more and more valuable, guys started talking about making him. Lefty wanted Donnie to get made. He saw it as validation. If Donnie got made, it would reflect well on Lefty. It would show that Lefty could spot talent, that Lefty was still valuable to the family. "I'm gonna propose you," Lefty told Donnie one day in early 1977. "You've earned it. You're solid. You know how to make money. You keep your mouth shut. You're perfect." Pistone's heart sank. This was the nightmare scenario. If they tried to make him, they'd expect him to kill someone. And if he refused, they'd know something was wrong. So Pistone stalled. He'd say he was honored, but wanted to earn more first. He'd say he wanted to prove himself further. He'd find excuses. Lefty didn't push it. He understood. Getting made was serious. You didn't rush into it. But the issue didn't go away. It hung over Pistone like a sword. Every day he was undercover. The risk increased that someone would force the issue. Meanwhile, Pistone was meeting more and more members of the Bonanno family through Lefty and Sonny Black. He was being introduced to soldiers, captains, even some members of other families. One of the key guys he met was Michael "Mikey Cigars" Sabella. Mikey was a captain in the Bonanno family. Older guy, respected. He took a liking to Donnie because Donnie was respectful and seemed to know his place. Pistone also met Nicholas "Nicky Glasses" Maranghello, another captain. These guys were the real deal. Made members with decades in the life, and they were accepting Donnie as one of their own. The FBI couldn't believe what Pistone was accomplishing. They'd never had an agent this deep before. Never had access to this level of the organization. Pistone was learning things about the Bonanno family that the FBI had never known. How they operated, where they kept records, how money flowed up the chain, who was loyal to who was feuding, who was skimming. He was also learning about their legitimate businesses. Because the mob doesn't just rob and steal. They own legitimate companies too. Restaurants, waste management companies, construction firms. They use these to launder money and as fronts for illegal operations. Pistone would report all of this to his FBI handlers. He'd meet them in secret locations, hotel rooms, parking garages, quickly download everything he'd learned, then go right back undercover, but the psychological toll was mounting. Think about what Pistone was doing every single day. He'd wake up as Donnie Brasco. He'd talk like Donnie, act like Donnie, think like Donnie. He'd spend 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours a day in character, and he couldn't slip, not for a second. Because these guys were watching. They were suspicious by nature. One wrong word, one wrong reaction, and they'd start asking questions. Pistone developed techniques to stay in character. He'd mentally rehearse his cover story every morning. He'd remind himself of Donnie's background, Donnie's family, Donnie's history. He'd think about how Donnie would react to various situations. He also had to physically transform. Donnie dressed differently than Joe Pistone, talked differently, moved differently. Pistone had to maintain this physical performance constantly. And he couldn't tell anyone. His wife knew he was undercover, but she didn't know the details. His daughters didn't know anything. His friends from before the FBI didn't even know where he was. Joe Pistone was essentially dead. For years, he was a ghost. All that existed was Donnie Brasco. The strain on his marriage was enormous. Maggie Pistone was living as a single mother. explaining to her daughters why their father wasn't home, making excuses at school events, lying to friends and family, and she couldn't even talk to her husband about it. When Pistone did come home, which was rare, he couldn't discuss the operation. It was classified, top secret. So they'd have these weird, stilted conversations. Maggie would ask how he was doing. Pistone would say he was fine. She'd tell him about the girls. He'd nod. Then he'd leave again. The distance grew. The resentment grew. The marriage was crumbling. But Pistone couldn't stop. He was in too deep. The operation was too important. The FBI was counting on him. And honestly, part of him didn't want to stop. Because being Donnie Brasco was exciting, dangerous, important. Being Joe Pistone, husband and father, felt ordinary by comparison. This is something psychologists warn about with deep cover operatives. You can start to prefer your cover identity to your real identity. You can start to become the person you're pretending to be. Pistone was walking that line. He'd later admit that there were times when he forgot he was an FBI agent. Times when he'd react to something as Donnie would react, not as Joe would react. Times when he'd feel genuine anger at someone disrespecting Lefty. Or genuine pride when Sonny Black complimented him. Or genuine fear when a deal went wrong. He was becoming Donnie Brasco. And Donnie Brasco was becoming a mobster. Now let's talk about Sonny Black in more detail. Because Sonny Black was about to become very important to this story. Dominic Napolitano, Sonny Black, was born in Brooklyn in 1930. He got his nickname because he had dark features and liked to wear dark clothes. Simple, like most mob nicknames, Sonny Black was a true believer in the Mafia. He believed in the code, the rules, the hierarchy. He believed that if you were loyal and worked hard, you'd be rewarded. Unlike Lefty, Sonny had been rewarded. He'd made captain. He had his own crew. He was a good earner. He was respected. But Sonny wanted more. He wanted to be a boss. Or at least an underboss. He was ambitious. Sonny ran his crew out of the Motion Lounge in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. This was a legitimate bar and social club. Sonny owned it. It was where he conducted business. The Motion Lounge was a typical mob hangout. Dark, smoky. A bar along one wall, some tables. A back room for private meetings. Music playing from a jukebox. Pictures of Frank Sinatra on the walls. Pistone spent a lot of time there. Because Lefty was part of Sonny's crew. And Donnie was Lefty's guy. Donnie was expected to be there too. Sonny Black ran a tight operation. He wasn't flashy. He didn't draw attention. He just made money. Gambling, loan sharking, hijacking, protection rackets, all the usual mob revenue streams. And he expected his guys to produce every week. Sonny's crew members had to kick up their earnings. If you didn't produce, you were useless. And useless guys didn't last long. Lefty was always scrambling to make his kick-up payments. He'd hustle and scheme and borrow. Some weeks, he could barely make it. This is why he was so desperate for Donnie to help him score big. Sonny Black liked Donnie. Donnie was respectful. He didn't cause problems. He seemed to make Lefty money, which meant Lefty could make his payments, which made Sonny's life easier. But Sonny was also cautious. He'd been in the life long enough to know that you couldn't trust anyone completely. So he watched Donnie, tested him, put him in situations to see how he'd react. One time, Sonny asked Donnie to hold some stolen goods. This was a test. If Donnie refused, it would signal that he wasn't really a criminal. If Donnie took them, and then the goods disappeared, it would mean he'd stolen from the family. Pistone handled it perfectly. He took the goods, held them safely, returned them when asked. Test passed another time. Sonny invited Donnie to a meeting with members of another family. This was an honor. It meant Sonny trusted Donnie enough to expose him to other families. It also meant Sonny was showing off his crew. Pistone went to the meeting, kept his mouth shut, showed respect. Another test passed, slowly, over months and then years. Sonny Black's trust in Donnie Brasco grew. And as that trust grew, Donnie's access increased. He was invited to more meetings, told about more operations, given more responsibility. He was becoming a valued member of Sonny Black's crew, which meant the FBI was getting unprecedented intelligence about the inner workings of a mafia family. But it also meant the web of relationships was getting more complicated. Because now it wasn't just Lefty who trusted Donnie. It was Sonny. It was other crew members. It was associates and connected guys across Brooklyn and Manhattan. All of these people would eventually be betrayed. All of them would face prison or death because they trusted Donnie Brasco. And at the center of it all was Joe Pistone, an FBI agent who was spending more time with these men than with his own family. The day-to-day reality of being Donnie Brasco was this. Wake up. Meet Lefty for breakfast. Make rounds collecting money. Sit in a social club for hours. Go to lunch. Sit in the social club some more. Go to dinner. Maybe go to a nightclub or bar. Finally go home around midnight. Repeat every day. For years, it sounds boring. And a lot of it was boring, but it was punctuated by moments of terror. Like the time a maid guy accused Donnie of shorting him on a jewelry deal. The guy was furious. He was threatening Donnie. Lefty had to step in and defend Donnie, risking his own reputation. If Lefty hadn't vouched for Donnie, Donnie might have been killed right there. Or the time Sonny Black asked Donnie to go on a collection with him. They went to some restaurant that owed money. The owner said he didn't have it. Sonny Black didn't argue. He just picked up a chair and smashed it over the guy's head. Then he calmly said, "Have it tomorrow." They left. Pistone had just witnessed an assault. He couldn't do anything about it without blowing his cover. Or the time Lefty told Donnie about a murder he participated in years ago. Described it in detail. Who they killed, how they killed him, where they buried the body. Lefty thought he was bonding with Donnie by sharing this. Pistone was secretly recording it, knowing this confession could send Lefty to prison for life. These were the moral dilemmas Pistone faced constantly. He was witnessing crimes, sometimes participating in minor crimes, building friendships with murderers, all in service of the greater good. But what is the greater good when you're lying to your best friend's face every single day? Pistone wrestled with this. He'd later say in interviews that Lefty was one of the best friends he ever had, that he genuinely cared about him, that he wished things could have been different. But they couldn't be different. Lefty was a criminal, a killer. He'd made his choices, and Pistone had made his. The operation was just getting started. We were only in year 2 of what would become a 6-year infiltration, the deepest undercover operation in FBI history, and it was about to go even deeper. Because everything was about to change in the Bonanno family. A change that would give Pistone access to the highest levels of the organization. A change that would start with a murder. A very public, very brutal murder. Let me take you inside Joe Pistone's head in 1978. He's been undercover for about 2 years now. 2 years of living as Donnie Brasco. 2 years of lying every single day. The FBI had set him up with an apartment in New York. Not a nice apartment. A working class place. The kind of place a jewel thief might live. Donnie Brasco's apartment. But Pistone also had his real home in New Jersey, where his wife Maggie and his 3 daughters lived, where Joe Pistone was supposed to exist. He'd go weeks without seeing them. Weeks. Imagine explaining that to your kids. Where's Daddy? Daddy has to work. Honey, but it's Christmas. I know, sweetheart. He'll be home soon. Except he wouldn't be home soon. He wouldn't be home for weeks. Pistone's oldest daughter was a teenager by this point. She understood something was wrong. She didn't know her father was undercover with the mob. But she knew he wasn't around. She knew her mother cried sometimes. She knew other kids had fathers who came to their soccer games and school plays. Her father was a ghost. The middle daughter was younger. She'd ask when Daddy was coming home. Maggie would say soon. The girl would wait by the window. But Daddy wouldn't come. The youngest was still very young. She barely knew her father. When he did show up, she'd be shy around him, like he was a stranger, because he was. Pistone would lie in bed in his Donnie Brasco apartment, unable to sleep, thinking about his daughters growing up without him, thinking about his wife, trying to hold everything together, thinking about the price his family was paying for this operation. But then his phone would ring. Lefty calling, "Donnie, where are you? We got a thing. Meet me in an hour." And Joe Pistone would disappear again. Donnie Brasco would take over. This is what people don't understand about deep cover work. It's not exciting. It's not glamorous. It's psychologically devastating. You're living a lie so deep that you start to forget what's real. You start to forget who you really are. Pistone had techniques to stay grounded. When he was alone, he'd say his real name out loud. I'm Joe Pistone. I'm an FBI agent. This is temporary. Like a mantra, a reminder, but more and more. It didn't feel temporary. It felt permanent. The FBI knew this was dangerous. They had psychologists monitoring Pistone. They'd do regular check-ins. How are you holding up? Fine. Really? Really. But he wasn't fine. Nobody could be fine living this way. And the operation was demanding more and more of him. By 1978, Pistone was wearing a wire regularly. The technology had improved. The devices were smaller, harder to detect, but they were still risky. Here's how it worked. Pistone would go to a designated location. Maybe a hotel room the FBI had rented. An FBI tech would wire him up. The recorder would be taped to his body, usually on his chest or back. The microphone would be hidden in his clothing. Then Pistone would go out into the world as Donnie Brasco, knowing that if anyone patted him down, if anyone got suspicious, if anyone found the wire, he was dead. The mob had gotten smart about wires. They'd pat guys down at the door to social clubs. They'd check people before important meetings. They were paranoid about rats because they'd been burned before. So Pistone couldn't wear a wire all the time. Sometimes he'd just have to remember conversations word for word and report them later. He got good at this, really good. He'd memorize entire conversations. Who said what, in what order, the exact words. Then he'd go to a pay phone, call his FBI handler, and download everything. Sometimes he'd record notes in code on matchbook covers or napkins, little reminders that only he could decipher. Then he'd flush them down a toilet. The surveillance the FBI was conducting was massive. They'd follow Pistone from a distance. They'd photograph the people he met with. They'd document the locations. They were building a map of the entire Bonanno family structure, but they had to be careful. If the mob noticed the same cars or the same faces following them around, they'd get suspicious. So the FBI rotated teams, used different vehicles, stayed far back. Sometimes they'd lose Pistone entirely. He'd go into a building and not come out for hours. The FBI would be outside sweating, wondering if he was dead inside, but Pistone would emerge. Still Donnie, still alive, still in character. The psychological toll of this was enormous. Pistone was essentially living in a state of constant, low-level fear. Not panic, not terror. Just a steady awareness that at any moment he could be found out and killed. And he was committing crimes. Real crimes. The FBI had given Pistone authorization to participate in certain illegal activities to maintain his cover. This is called otherwise illegal activity in FBI parlance. It's controversial, but sometimes necessary in undercover work. Pistone helped fence stolen jewelry. That's illegal. He participated in illegal gambling operations. That's illegal. He was present during conversations about crimes and didn't report them immediately. That's technically obstruction. The FBI justified this by saying the intelligence they were gathering was worth the minor crimes. They were going to take down an entire Mafia family. A few fenced necklaces were acceptable collateral damage. But Pistone had to live with it. He had to live with knowing he was breaking the law. Breaking the oath he took as an FBI agent. This is the gray area of undercover work. It's not black and white. It's morally complicated. And it got even more complicated because Pistone was forming real emotional bonds with these criminals. Lefty wasn't just a target anymore. He was Pistone's friend. They talked every day, multiple times a day. Lefty would tell Donnie about his problems, his health issues, his money troubles, his regrets. And Donnie would listen, give advice, be supportive. This wasn't an act anymore. Pistone genuinely cared about Lefty. He didn't want Lefty to suffer. He didn't want Lefty to die. But he knew that when this operation ended, Lefty would suffer. Lefty would probably die. And Pistone would be the one who caused it. This is what destroyed Pistone psychologically. Not the danger, not the lying, the emotional betrayal. He was betraying someone who loved him, someone who trusted him completely, someone who would literally die for him. And he was doing it knowingly, deliberately, every single day. One night in 1978, Pistone went home to New Jersey. He walked into his house. His wife was in the kitchen. She looked at him and started crying. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "The girls barely know you. I barely know you. You're never here. And when you are here, you're not really here. You're somewhere else." Pistone wanted to explain, wanted to tell her how important the operation was, how close they were to bringing down the Bonanno family, how this was the chance of a lifetime. But he couldn't, because he knew she was right. He was losing his family to save them from the mob. The irony wasn't lost on him. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know it's hard, but this won't last forever." "How long?" Maggie asked. "How long, Joe? Another year? 2 years? 5 years? When does it end?" He didn't have an answer, because he didn't know. The FBI had said, "As long as it takes," and it was taking everything. That night, Pistone lay in bed next to his wife. Staring at the ceiling, he thought about quitting, about going to the FBI and saying he was done, pulling the plug on the operation. But he knew he wouldn't, couldn't, because he was in too deep. The operation was too important. The evidence they were gathering was too valuable, and honestly, part of him didn't want to quit, because being Donnie Brasco gave him a purpose, a mission, an identity that felt more real than Joe Pistone. Suburban dad, this is the insidious thing about deep cover work. You start to prefer the lie to the truth. You start to become the person you're pretending to be. Pistone was becoming Donnie Brasco, and Donnie Brasco was becoming a mobster. Let me tell you about some of the close calls. The moments when Pistone almost got caught. One time, Lefty and Donnie were at a social club. A maid guy Pistone had never met before walked in. The guy looked at Donnie and said, "I know you from somewhere." Pistone's heart stopped. If this guy actually knew Joe Pistone from somewhere, maybe saw him at the FBI building, maybe knew him from before, the game was over. "I don't think so," Pistone said calmly. "No. I definitely know your face," the guy insisted. He was studying Pistone intently. Lefty jumped in. "This is Donnie. He's from California. You probably seen him around here the last couple years." The guy kept staring. Pistone kept his face neutral. Didn't look nervous, didn't look away, just maintained eye contact. Finally, the guy shrugged. "Yeah, maybe. You look like someone I used to know." Crisis averted. But Pistone was shaking inside. Another time, the FBI wanted Pistone to wear a wire to an important meeting. Pistone knew they'd probably pat him down at the door. He told the FBI it was too risky. They insisted they needed the recording. So Pistone wore the wire. He walked into the social club. 2 guys were at the door. "Arms up," one said. Pistone raised his arms. The guy patted him down. Pistone felt the wire against his chest, felt the guy's hands getting closer to it. The guy's hand brushed over the wire. Pistone thought, "This is it. I'm dead." But the guy didn't notice, or if he did, he didn't think anything of it. He nodded. "Go ahead." Pistone walked into the club on shaky legs. He'd just survived by pure luck. Later, he told the FBI, no more wires unless absolutely necessary. Too risky, the FBI agreed. There were other close calls. Times when someone asked a question Pistone didn't have an answer for. Times when his cover story had holes. Times when he said the wrong thing and had to quickly talk his way out. But he survived, because he was smart, because he was quick, and because he was lucky. You need all 3 in undercover work. Skill, intelligence, and luck. But luck runs out eventually. Pistone knew that. Every day he stayed under, the odds of getting caught increased. The question wasn't if he'd get caught. It was when. And what would happen to him when that moment came. Meanwhile, the FBI was building a massive case. They had recordings, photographs, documents. They had evidence of crimes going back years. They had testimony. Pistone's testimony. about the inner workings of the Bonanno family. They had enough to indict dozens of people, maybe more than 100, but they needed to keep going, because they wanted the bosses, the captains, the real power players. And to get them, Pistone needed to go deeper. Which brings us to the summer of 1979, and a murder that changed everything. July 12, 1979. A hot summer day in Brooklyn. The kind of day where the pavement shimmers and the air feels thick enough to choke on. Carmine Galante, boss of the Bonanno family, was having lunch at Joe and Mary's Italian-American restaurant on Knickerbocker Avenue in Bushwick. Brooklyn Galante was 69 years old. He'd been in the mob since the 1920s. He was old school, brutal, ruthless. He'd risen to power in the Bonanno family after the previous bosses had been exiled or imprisoned. But Galante had a problem. He was too ambitious, too greedy. He wanted to control everything, the entire New York drug trade. He wanted the Bonanno family to dominate all the other families. The other bosses didn't like this. The commission, the board of directors of the Mafia, made up of the bosses of the 5 families, met and decided Galante had to go. So on that hot July day, Galante sat down for lunch. He was with his bodyguards, his cousin, and a few associates. They ordered food. They ate. Galante lit up a cigar. Then 3 men walked in wearing ski masks. They had shotguns. They opened fire. Galante was hit multiple times. His bodyguards were killed. The whole thing took maybe 30 seconds. When it was over, Carmine Galante was dead on the restaurant patio, his cigar still clenched in his teeth. This wasn't unusual in the mob. Bosses get killed. It's part of the business. What was unusual was how public it was. Middle of the afternoon, witnesses everywhere. Photos ended up in newspapers across the country. The famous photograph shows Galante lying on his back, blood pooling around him, that cigar still in his mouth. It became one of the most iconic mob hit photos in history. But here's what matters for our story. Galante's death created a power vacuum in the Bonanno family, and Sonny Black Napolitano saw an opportunity. After Galante's murder, the Bonanno family fractured into factions. Different captains wanted control. There was Alphonse, Sonny Red Indelicato. There was Philip, Philly Lucky, Jacone. There was Dominic, Big Trinchera. These guys all wanted to be boss. They all had crews. They all had loyalties. And then there was Sonny Black Napolitano. He wasn't trying to be boss. He was smarter than that. He aligned himself with the acting boss, Philip Rastelli, who was still in prison, but pulling strings from inside. The commission, the bosses of the other families, recognized Rastelli as the official boss of the Bonannos, which meant Sonny Black had the backing of the most powerful organization in the American Mafia. Sonny Red and his faction didn't like this. They thought they should be in charge. So there was tension, bad tension, the kind that leads to war. Pistone watched all of this unfold from inside. He was there at the meetings. He heard the conversations. He saw the alliances forming and breaking. This was gold for the FBI. They were getting intelligence about a mob power struggle in real time. They knew who was allied with whom, who wanted to kill whom, who was vulnerable. But for Pistone, it was also dangerous. Because when the mob goes to war, everybody's a potential target, friend or foe, made guy or associate. Doesn't matter. Bullets don't discriminate. Sonny Black emerged from the power struggle stronger. He got promoted to captain, officially recognized by the commission. He took over more territory. He got more respect. And because Lefty was in Sonny's crew, and Donnie was Lefty's guy, Donnie's status rose too. Suddenly, Donnie Brasco wasn't just some associate. He was connected to a rising star in the Bonanno family. He was invited to bigger meetings. He met more important people. He had access to information that the FBI had never gotten before. Sonny Black trusted Donnie more and more. He'd give Donnie assignments, send him on collections, include him in planning sessions. One time, Sonny pulled Donnie aside. "You're a good kid," Sonny said. "You know how to keep your mouth shut. You know how to work. Lefty was right about you? Thanks. Sonny, you stick with me. You'll do well. I'm going places. And I take care of the guys who are loyal to me. This was both good news and bad news for Pistone. Good because he was getting deeper access. Bad because the deeper he got, the harder it would be to extract safely. By late 1979, Pistone had been undercover for over 3 years. 3 years of living as Donnie Brasco. 3 years away from his family. 3 years of constant lying. The operation was supposed to last maybe a year. Maybe 2 at most. But the FBI kept extending it. Because the intelligence was too good, they were too close to taking down the entire family. Just a little longer, they told Pistone. Just until we get what we need. But there was always something more to get. Always one more meeting, one more piece of evidence. One more target. Pistone was exhausted. Physically, mentally, emotionally exhausted. But he kept going. Because now, there was another complication. Sonny Black's war with Sonny Red. In 1980, Sonny Black decided to expand operations to Florida. This wasn't unusual. A lot of New York families had operations in Florida. Warmer weather, wealthy tourists to exploit. Easier to hide illegal activities. Sonny Black wanted to establish a presence in Tampa and Miami. He wanted to get into the nightclub business down there. Legitimate clubs that could be used for illegal gambling. Loan sharking, drug distribution, and he wanted Donnie Brasco to help. You're going to Florida, Sonny told Donnie. You and Lefty. You're gonna set things up down there. This was huge. Sonny was trusting Donnie and Lefty with a major operation. This was the kind of responsibility that usually only went to made guys. For the FBI, this was perfect. They'd get intelligence about the Bonanno family's Florida operations. They could expand the investigation. Maybe bring in local FBI offices to help with surveillance. For Pistone, it was another layer of lies. Now he had to maintain his cover in a completely different environment. Lefty and Donnie went to Florida in early 1980. They stayed in hotels. They scouted locations for the nightclub. They met with local criminals who could help with the operation. The FBI set up surveillance down there too. They rented apartments near where Pistone was staying. They followed him, recorded his meetings, but they had to be even more careful in Florida. The mob guys didn't know the area as well. They were more paranoid, more alert for anything unusual. Pistone and Lefty found the location for the club, an existing nightclub that could be bought and renovated. Sonny Black approved it. Money was sent down. The operation was moving forward. For a few months, Pistone spent more time in Florida than in New York. He'd fly back and forth. This actually gave him more opportunities to see his family when he'd fly through New York. He could sometimes steal a few hours at home, but it also meant more stress. More lying, more chances to slip up in Florida. Pistone met associates of other families. The Tampa family had connections to the Bonannos, so did some Miami crews. Pistone was being introduced to a wider network of organized crime. The FBI was documenting all of it, building cases not just against the Bonannos, but against multiple families. One night in Tampa, Lefty and Donnie were having dinner. They'd been drinking. Lefty got emotional again. "You know what I love about you, Donnie?" Lefty said. "What's that?" "You're loyal. You're smart. You remind me of me when I was younger." Before I got old and tired, Pistone didn't know what to say. "I never had a son," Lefty continued. "But if I did, I'd want him to be like you." This is what killed Pistone. These moments of genuine affection. These moments when Lefty revealed how much he cared about Donnie. Because Pistone knew the truth. He knew what was coming. He knew that one day, soon, maybe the FBI would shut down the operation. They'd arrest everyone. Lefty would go to prison, or worse. And it would be Donnie's fault. "I appreciate that." "Lefty," Pistone said quietly. "No, I mean it. You're like a son to me." Pistone wanted to tell him the truth. Wanted to say, "I'm an FBI agent. I'm not your son. I'm not even your friend. I'm using you." But he couldn't. The operation was too important, so he just nodded. "You're like a father to me too." And the lie hung in the air between them. The Florida operation was successful from the mob's perspective. The nightclub opened. It started generating money. Illegal gambling happened in the back rooms. loan sharking, drug deals, from the FBI's perspective. It was even more successful. They were documenting everything, building cases, gathering evidence. By the end of 1980, Pistone had been undercover for almost 5 years. 5 years. This was unprecedented in FBI history. No agent had ever stayed under this long. The psychological evaluations were getting concerning. Pistone was showing signs of stress, identity confusion, emotional distress, but he refused to quit. He was too close. They were too close. Just a little longer, he told himself. Just a little longer. Meanwhile, back in New York, the tension between Sonny Black's faction and Sonny Red's faction was getting worse. Sonny Red Indelicato, Philip Giacconi, and Dominic Trinchera, the three captains who opposed Sonny Black, were planning something, maybe a coup, maybe a hit. The intelligence was unclear. Sonny Black knew they were plotting against him. He was planning something too, and Donnie Brasco was going to be right in the middle of it. May 5th, 1981. This is the date when everything changed. The date that marked the point of no return for the entire operation. Sonny Black called a meeting. He told his crew to be at a social club in Brooklyn. Important meeting. Everyone had to be there. Pistone showed up with Lefty. They walked into the club. It was tense. You could feel it in the air. Sonny Black was there. So were other members of his crew. Meg guys, associates. Everyone packed into this small room, and then Sonny Black made an announcement. "We got a problem," he said. "Sonny Red and his guys. They're going against the family. They're going against the commission's decision. That can't stand." Everyone nodded. This was mob politics, straightforward. "There's gonna be a meeting," Sonny continued. "A sit-down to settle this. Sonny Red, Philly Lucky, Big Trin. They're all gonna be there. We're gonna resolve this once and for all." Pistone knew what this meant. Everyone in the room knew what this meant. This wasn't going to be a negotiation. This was going to be a hit. The meeting was set for May 5th, 1981. At a social club in Brooklyn, Sonny Red, Philip Giacconi, and Dominic Trinchera were invited. They were told it was a peace meeting, a chance to settle their differences. They walked into a trap. When they arrived, they were ambushed. All three were shot and killed. Their bodies were hidden. They wouldn't be found for years. This was the three captains' murder. One of the most significant mob hits in New York history. Pistone wasn't present at the actual murders. Thank God. But he was close enough to know what was happening. He heard about it immediately after. Lefty told him, "It's done, Sonny Red and his guys. They're gone." "What happened?" "What do you think happened?" "They went against the family. They paid for it." This was a turning point. Sonny Black had just consolidated power. He'd eliminated his rivals. He was now one of the most powerful captains in the Bonanno family. And Donnie Brasco was part of his inner circle. The FBI was ecstatic. They had intelligence about a triple homicide. They knew who ordered it, who carried it out, where the bodies were hidden. This was massive. But for Pistone, it was devastating. Because now he was connected to a triple murder. Not directly. He hadn't pulled a trigger. But he was part of the organization that did it. How do you live with that? How do you go home to your wife and kids knowing that you're connected to a triple murder? You don't. You just keep going. Keep your head down. Keep playing the role. After the three captains' murder, Sonny Black's status rose dramatically. The commission recognized him as a true power in the Bonanno family. He was given more territory, more respect, more authority. And he rewarded the guys who'd been loyal to him. Lefty's status rose too, not dramatically. He was still just a soldier, but he was Sonny's guy. That meant something. And Donnie? Donnie was golden. Sonny Black trusted Donnie completely now. He'd give Donnie sensitive information, send him on important errands, include him in private conversations. One time, Sonny pulled Donnie aside. "I want you to meet some people," he said. He introduced Donnie to members of other families, the Gambinos, the Genovese. These were made guys from the most powerful families in New York. Pistone was meeting the upper echelon of the American Mafia. The FBI couldn't believe what he was accomplishing. But by this point, mid-1981, Pistone was barely holding it together. He'd been undercover for 5.5 years. 5.5 years of constant lying, constant fear, constant moral compromise. His marriage was essentially over. Maggie had stopped asking when he was coming home. She knew he wasn't coming home. Not really. His daughters were growing up without him. The oldest was in high school. She was angry at him, resentful. The younger two barely knew him. Joe Pistone was a ghost in his own family. And Donnie Brasco was more real than Joe had ever been. Pistone would later describe this period as the darkest of his life. He was depressed, anxious. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, not knowing where he was, not knowing who he was. The FBI psychologists were worried. They wanted to pull him out, but Pistone refused. "Just a little longer," he said. "We're so close, but close to what? How do you know when you're done with an operation like this? When you've gathered enough evidence? When you've penetrated deep enough?" The FBI didn't know. They'd never done anything like this before. So they kept Pistone under, and he kept going deeper. By the summer of 1981, Pistone had met dozens of maid members across multiple families. He knew the structure of the Bonanno family intimately. He knew their operations, their territories, their revenue streams, their hierarchies. He had evidence of murder, extortion, racketeering, loan sharking, illegal gambling, drug trafficking, and dozens of other crimes. The FBI had enough to indict over 100 people, but they wanted more. They always wanted more. Then something happened that forced their hand. In June 1981, someone, the FBI never figured out who, started asking questions about Donnie Brasco. Where's this guy from again? Who vouches for him? What's his background? The questions were casual, nothing too alarming, but they were questions nonetheless. And in the mob, questions are dangerous. Sonny Black heard about it. He asked Lefty, "Is Donnie solid?" "Absolutely," Lefty said. "I'd stake my life on it." "You are staking your life on it," Sonny reminded him. Lefty knew. He'd always known. If Donnie turned out to be a rat, Lefty would be killed. That was the rule. But Lefty trusted Donnie completely. He had no doubt. The FBI heard about the questions through their surveillance, and they got nervous. If the mob started seriously investigating Donnie's background, they might find holes. They might discover the truth. And if they discovered the truth, Pistone would be killed. Immediately. The FBI started making plans to extract him. Not immediately, but soon, very soon. Pistone pushed back. "I can handle it. Let me keep going. Joe, it's too risky. If they start digging, they won't find anything. My cover's solid. Your cover's been solid for 5 years. But these guys aren't stupid. If they really start looking, just give me a few more weeks, maybe a month. There's still more I can get." The FBI reluctantly agreed. A few more weeks, that's it. But Pistone knew, deep down. He knew it was almost over. 6 years of his life. 6 years of lying. 6 years of becoming someone else. And soon it would all come crashing down. He thought about Lefty. About the conversations they'd had. The meals they'd shared. The laughs, the friendship. He thought about Sonny Black. About the trust he'd been shown. The respect. He thought about all the mobsters he'd met. The ones who'd welcomed him, accepted him, treated him like family. And he knew what was going to happen to them. Prison, long sentences, maybe death, because of him. Because of Donnie Brasco. Because of a lie that had become too real. But then, everything changed. July 26, 1981. Joe Pistone was sitting in a social club in Brooklyn. It was a Sunday afternoon. He was with Lefty and a few other guys. They were watching a baseball game on TV, drinking coffee, eating pastries from the Italian bakery down the street. Just another day in the life of Donnie Brasco, except this was the last day. Pistone's pager went off. It was a specific code. A code only the FBI would use. The code meant extraction. Now, Pistone made an excuse. "I gotta make a call. Be right back." He went to a payphone on the corner. Called his handler. "We're pulling you out," the handler said. Tonight. Why?" "We got intelligence. Someone's asking serious questions about you. Real questions. They're checking your background in California." We think they might be getting close. Pistone's stomach dropped. Who? We don't know, but we can't risk it. It's over, Joe. We're shutting it down. 6 years? Over just like that? When? Tonight? Go home, Pac. We'll have a team pick you up. You're going into protection. Pistone hung up the phone. He stood there for a moment, processing 6 years of his life. 6 years of Donnie Brasco done. He walked back into the social club. Lefty looked up. Everything okay? Yeah, Pistone said. Just had to make a call. He sat back down, watched the game, made small talk, all while knowing this was the last time he'd see these people as Donnie Brasco, the last time he'd see Lefty as a friend. Because tomorrow, Donnie Brasco would disappear, and Joe Pistone would destroy all of them. That evening, Pistone went back to his Donnie Brasco apartment. He packed a bag, just the essentials, left everything else. An FBI team picked him up around midnight. They drove him to a safe location, debriefed him, started the extraction process. But here's the thing. They couldn't just pull Pistone out and disappear him. Because Donnie Brasco was a real person in the mob's eyes. He had relationships, obligations. People expected to see him. If Donnie just vanished, the mob would get suspicious. They'd start asking questions. They might figure out he was law enforcement, and then they'd start looking for rats, looking for who else might be cooperating. So the FBI came up with a cover story. They'd say Donnie got arrested in California on an old warrant. Some jewelry theft charge. He got picked up, thrown in county jail. He'd be out of circulation for a while. This would buy the FBI time to prepare the indictments, get the arrest warrants ready, coordinate with prosecutors. They put the word out through their informants. Donnie Brasco got pinched in California. He's in custody. Lefty heard about it. He was worried. He tried to find out more information. Where exactly was Donnie? What jail? When was his court date? But the information was vague. Deliberately vague. Days went by, then weeks. The FBI was working around the clock. They had 5+ years of intelligence to organize, hundreds of tapes to transcribe, thousands of pages of reports to compile, hundreds of targets to identify. This was going to be the biggest mob takedown in history. Over 100 indictments, multiple families, years of conspiracy charges, murder charges, racketeering charges. The federal prosecutors were salivating. This was career-making stuff, but they had to get it right. One mistake, one technicality, and these guys could walk. Meanwhile, Pistone was in a safe house, debriefing, testifying before grand juries, preparing for the trials that would inevitably come, and dealing with the psychological aftermath. For 6 years, Pistone had been Donnie Brasco. He'd thought like Donnie, acted like Donnie, lived like Donnie. Now, suddenly, he was supposed to be Joe Pistone again. FBI agent, husband, father, but Joe Pistone felt like a stranger. Pistone didn't know how to be Joe anymore. The FBI psychologists worked with him, tried to help him transition back. But you can't just flip a switch after 6 years of deep cover. Pistone was depressed, anxious. He'd have nightmares about the mob finding him, killing his family. He'd also have dreams about Lefty, about sitting in the social club, drinking coffee, talking, and he'd wake up feeling guilty. Guilty for lying, guilty for betraying, guilty for destroying his friend. But it had to be done. These were criminals, murderers. They'd chosen their path. Pistone tried to tell himself this, tried to justify it. But it didn't make him feel any better. On August 17, 1981, just a few weeks after Pistone was extracted, the FBI was ready to move. They coordinated with FBI offices across the country. New York, New Jersey, Florida, California. Everywhere the Bonanno family had operations. They prepared arrest teams, got search warrants, briefed prosecutors, and then, in the early morning hours, they executed. FBI agents raided social clubs, homes, businesses. They arrested MAID members, associates, guys who'd never even heard of Donnie Brasco. Over 100 people were arrested in a single day. It was chaos. The mob had never seen anything like it. And then the FBI dropped the bomb. Donnie Brasco was an undercover FBI agent. His real name was Joseph Pistone. He'd been undercover for 6 years. Everything he'd seen, everything he'd heard, everything he'd learned, it was all evidence. The mob world exploded. Donnie Brasco was a Fed? Impossible. He'd been vouched for. He'd been trusted. He'd been one of them, but it was true. The FBI held a press conference. They showed photos of Pistone as Donnie Brasco, with known mobsters. They played excerpts of recordings. They laid out the evidence. The media went crazy. This was the biggest mob story in decades. Newspapers ran front-page stories. TV news covered it extensively. This was bigger than Watergate. The FBI agent who'd infiltrated the Mafia, who'd lived with them for 6 years, who'd become one of them. It was unprecedented, historic, the greatest undercover operation in FBI history. But for the people involved, it was a catastrophe. When Lefty Ruggiero heard that Donnie Brasco was an FBI agent, he didn't believe it. No, he said. No way, not Donnie, I know him. He's not a cop. But the evidence was undeniable. The FBI had photos, tapes, documents. Donnie Brasco was FBI Special Agent Joseph Pistone. Lefty's world collapsed. For 6 years, Donnie had been his best friend, his partner, his son, practically. Lefty had trusted him completely, vouched for him, brought him into the family. And it was all a lie. Lefty sat in his apartment, chain-smoking, trying to process it. Every conversation they'd had, every meal they'd shared, every secret Lefty had told him, all of it recorded, all of it evidence. Lefty had been played. For 6 years, he'd been played. But it was worse than that, because Lefty knew the rules. He'd vouched for Donnie, and Donnie had turned out to be a rat, which meant, by mob law, Lefty was responsible. Lefty was going to be killed. The commission would order it. Sonny Black would carry it out. Or maybe someone else. Didn't matter who. The result would be the same. Lefty Ruggiero, 60 years old, 30-some years in the mob, was going to be murdered because he trusted the wrong person. He knew it. Everyone knew it. Lefty's phone rang. It was another mobster. Lefty, you need to go into hiding. They're going to kill you. I know, Lefty said calmly. So what are you going to do? What can I do? Where am I going to hide? They'll find me eventually. This is one of the most tragic parts of the whole story. Lefty knew he was going to die. He knew the mob was going to kill him for vouching for a rat. But he didn't run. He didn't hide. He just accepted it. Why? Because running would mean he was a coward. And Lefty, for all his faults, wasn't a coward. He'd lived by the rules of the mob his entire adult life. And now he was going to die by those rules. But then something unexpected happened. The FBI arrested Lefty. They picked him up on racketeering charges, based on Pistone's testimony and the evidence they'd gathered. Lefty was indicted, along with dozens of other Bonanno family members. Lefty was actually relieved. Prison was better than a bullet in the head. His lawyer tried to make a deal. Lefty could cooperate, testify against the family. In exchange, he'd get a lighter sentence, maybe even witness protection. But Lefty refused. I'm not a rat, he said. I may have vouched for a rat, but I'm not one. Even after everything, after being betrayed by Donnie, after being marked for death by the family, after losing everything, Lefty still held to the code he wouldn't rat. He went to trial in 1982. Pistone testified against him, described all their conversations, all the crimes Lefty had committed or discussed. Lefty sat in the courtroom and listened to his best friend, the person he trusted more than anyone, destroy him. Imagine that, sitting there, watching the person you loved like a son testify against you, knowing every word is true, knowing you brought this on yourself by trusting him. The jury found Lefty guilty. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. 15 years for a 60-year-old man. Basically a life sentence. Lefty went to prison in 1982. He served his time quietly. No complaints, no cooperation. He did his time like a man, according to the code. He was released in the early 1990s, having served about a decade. He was in his 70s by then, broken, defeated, poor. He went back to his old neighborhood in New York. But everything had changed. The guys he knew were dead or in prison. The social clubs were closed. The old ways were gone. Lefty lived in a small apartment. Alone, he had no money. The mob didn't help him. Why would they? He'd vouched for a rat. He was poison. His family didn't want much to do with him. His criminal past had destroyed those relationships years ago. He was alone in 1994. Benjamin Lefty Guns Ruggiero died of lung cancer. He was 68 years old. He died poor, alone. Forgotten, no mob funeral, no respect paid. Just an old man who'd wasted his life in a criminal organization that discarded him the moment he became a liability. But here's the really tragic part. Lefty never blamed Donnie Brasco. In interviews after his release from prison, Lefty was asked about Pistone, about how he felt being betrayed. He had a job to do, Lefty said. He did it. I don't blame him. I blame myself for not seeing it, even after everything. Lefty didn't hate Donnie. He was just sad. Disappointed, not in Donnie, but in himself. Pistone heard about this, about how Lefty had spoken about him, and it destroyed him. Because Pistone had genuinely cared about Lefty. Despite everything, despite Lefty being a criminal, Pistone had loved him like a father, and he'd destroyed him. Pistone would later say that Lefty's fate was the hardest part of the operation. Harder than the danger, harder than the lying, harder than anything else, because Lefty was a victim. Not of the FBI, of the mob, of the life he'd chosen. Lefty had been loyal to the mob for over 30 years. And what did it get him? Nothing. He died poor and alone while the bosses he'd served lived in mansions. Pistone would think about this for the rest of his life. About how Lefty deserved better. About how, in another life, they could have actually been friends. But this wasn't another life. This was reality, and in reality, Lefty paid the ultimate price for trusting the wrong person. The movie Donnie Brasco shows Lefty getting arrested and facing death. Al Pacino gives this heartbreaking performance as a man who knows he's doomed. The real story is even sadder. Because Lefty didn't die in some dramatic mob hit. He died slowly of cancer. Alone in a cheap apartment, forgotten by everyone. That's the real tragedy of Lefty Ruggiero. Not a bullet, just slow, sad decline into nothing. Dominic Sonny Black Napolitano's fate was different, and much more violent. When Sonny Black found out that Donnie Brasco was an FBI agent, he knew exactly what it meant for him. He'd brought Donnie into the family. He trusted him. He'd given him access to operations, meetings, sensitive information. Donnie had been part of Sonny's crew, which meant Sonny was responsible. The commission, the bosses of the 5 families, met to discuss the Donnie Brasco situation. This was a catastrophe. An FBI agent had infiltrated the Bonanno family for 6 years. He had evidence against hundreds of maid members and associates. Someone had to pay for this. The commission issued a death sentence on Sonny Black Napolitano. Sonny knew it was coming. The mob doesn't keep secrets like this. Word gets around. People talk. Sonny started getting calls. Watch your back. They're coming for you. Get out of town. But Sonny, like Lefty, didn't run, because running was admitting guilt. Admitting cowardice in the mob. You face your fate like a man. That's the code. On August 17, 1981, the same day the FBI executed their mass arrests, Sonny Black received a call. We need to see you. There's a meeting. Sonny knew what this meant. This wasn't a meeting. This was an execution, but he went anyway. Before he left his house, Sonny did something unusual. He took off all his jewelry, his watch, his rings, everything. He gave them to his girlfriend. Hold on to these for me, he said. She looked at him, confused. Why? Just hold on to them. Sonny knew he wasn't coming back. He knew he was going to his death. But he went anyway, because that was the code. He drove to a house in Staten Island, a social club in the basement. He walked in. There were several men there. Made guys he knew. They were waiting for him. What happened next isn't entirely clear, because no one who was there has ever talked about it publicly. But based on later evidence and testimony, here's what we know. Sonny Black was shot and killed. Probably multiple times. Probably quickly. His body was then disposed of. Not dumped in a river or left in a car trunk. Buried, carefully hidden for over 20 years. Nobody knew where Sonny Black's body was. It became one of the unsolved mysteries of mob lore. Where was Sonny Black buried? Then, in January 2004, construction workers in Staten Island were digging a foundation for a new building. They found bones, human bones. The police were called. The remains were examined. DNA testing was done. It was Sonny Black Napolitano. He'd been buried in a shallow grave. His hands had been cut off. This was a mob message. You shook hands with a rat, so you lose your hands. His body had been there for over 20 years, decomposing slowly underground while life went on above. Sonny Black was 51 years old when he was killed. He'd been in the mob his whole adult life. He'd worked his way up from soldier to captain. He'd been a good earner, a loyal member. And he died because he trusted the wrong person. The mob didn't care that Sonny had been smart, that he'd been careful, that he'd served the family well. He'd vouched for a rat. That was unforgivable. So they killed him, cut off his hands, buried him like garbage, and forgot about him. When Pistone heard about Sonny Black's death, which happened very quickly after the arrests, he was shaken. He'd known this would happen. He'd known that the people who vouched for him would be killed. That was mob law. But knowing it intellectually is different from confronting the reality. Sonny Black was dead. Because of him. Because of the operation. Pistone tried to justify it. Sonny was a murderer. He'd killed the 3 captains. He'd been involved in dozens of other crimes. He deserved to go to prison. Maybe even death. But not like this. Not executed and mutilated and buried in a shallow grave. The FBI didn't care. This was collateral damage. Occupational hazard for mobsters. They'd chosen the life. They paid the price. But Pistone cared, because despite everything, despite knowing these men were criminals, he'd spent 6 years with them. He'd broken bread with them. He'd laughed with them. They'd been his friends. Or as close to friends as you can have when your entire relationship is based on a lie. Sonny Black's murder sent a message through the mob world. If you vouch for someone and they turn out to be a rat, you die. No exceptions, no mercy. This actually helped the FBI in a perverse way, because it made mobsters even more paranoid, even more suspicious of outsiders, even more isolated, which made them easier to infiltrate with informants and surveillance. But for the people involved, it was a tragedy. Sonny Black Napolitano wasn't a good person. He was a murderer, a criminal, a member of organized crime. But he was also a human being, and he died a brutal death because he made a mistake trusting Donnie Brasco. The movie Donnie Brasco shows Sonny Black preparing for his death. Michael Madsen plays him as stoic, accepting his fate. The real Sonny Black was probably terrified. Who wouldn't be? He was walking into his own execution. But he went anyway, because in the mob, your reputation is everything. And running would destroy his reputation. Better to die with honor than live as a coward. That was Sonny Black's final act, going to his death like a man. According to the twisted code of the Mafia, he was murdered on August 17, 1981. His body was found on January 6, 2004, 23 years underground. That's the real story of Sonny Black Napolitano, not a movie character. A real person who made real choices and paid a real price. And Joe Pistone has to live with that for the rest of his life. The trials that followed the Donnie Brasco operation were massive, unprecedented in scope. Over 100 mobsters were indicted. The charges ranged from racketeering to murder to loan sharking to drug trafficking. The star witness? FBI Special Agent Joseph Pistone. Pistone testified in multiple trials over several years. He'd sit on the witness stand and describe in detail the crimes he'd witnessed, the conversations he'd recorded, the structure of the Bonanno family. His testimony was devastating, because he wasn't some low-level informant with credibility issues. He was an FBI agent who'd been deep undercover. His word carried weight. Defense attorneys tried to discredit him. They'd ask, "Didn't you lie to these men for 6 years? How do we know you're not lying now?" Pistone would calmly respond, "I lied to criminals in the course of my duties as an FBI agent. I'm not lying now. I'm under oath. They'd ask, didn't you commit crimes yourself while undercover? I was authorized to participate in certain illegal activities to maintain my cover. Everything I did was approved by the FBI and necessary for the operation. They couldn't break him because everything he said was true. He had tapes, he had notes, he had corroborating evidence. The juries believed him, one by one. The defendants were convicted. Some took plea deals. They'd plead guilty in exchange for reduced sentences, maybe 10 to 15 years instead of 20 to 30. Others went to trial and lost. The most significant convictions: Anthony Meera, the violent associate who first introduced Pistone to the Bonanno family. He was killed by the mob in 1982, before his trial, shot in the head and left in a car in Manhattan. The mob blamed him for vouching for Donnie initially. Dominic "Sonny Black" Napolitano, murdered by the mob. As we discussed, his case never went to trial because he was dead. Benjamin "Lefty Guns" Ruggiero, convicted of racketeering, sentenced to 15 years. Served about 10. Numerous soldiers and associates. Convicted of various charges. Sentences ranging from 5 to 30 years. The Bonanno family was decimated. They lost captains, soldiers, associates. Their operations were disrupted. Their revenue streams dried up. But here's what people don't understand. The mob didn't go away. Yes, the Bonannos were weakened, but they rebuilt. New guys stepped up. New operations were established. The family continued. Because the Mafia is like a hydra. Cut off one head, 2 more grow back. But the Donnie Brasco operation did change things. It made the mob more paranoid, more careful about outsiders, harder to infiltrate, which was, in a way, the FBI's goal. Now let's talk about the contract on Pistone's life. The Bonanno family, specifically the Commission of the 5 Families, put out a $500,000 contract on Joseph Pistone, $500,000 to whoever killed the FBI agent who'd infiltrated the mob. This wasn't unusual. The mob puts contracts on people all the time. But this was significant because of the amount and because it was approved by the commission. The contract was, and technically still is, active. Pistone went into witness protection after the trials. The FBI gave him a new identity, relocated him and his family, protected them 24/7. But witness protection is hard. You can't contact old friends, can't go to familiar places, can't live a normal life. Pistone's marriage didn't survive. The strain of 6 years undercover, followed by the stress of witness protection, was too much. Maggie and Joe divorced in the late 1980s. She got custody of their daughters. They all went their separate ways. Joe Pistone lost his family, not to the mob, to the job. His daughters grew up resenting him. He'd missed their childhoods, missed important moments. All for a job. Was it worth it? Pistone would say yes. He destroyed a major criminal organization, put away dozens of dangerous criminals, upheld the law, but in quiet moments, in interviews years later, you can see the regret in his eyes, the sadness. He sacrificed his family for the job, and he can never get that back. The contract on his life forced him to be careful for years. He couldn't be Joe Pistone publicly. He had to use aliases, change his appearance, move frequently. Eventually, in the 1990s, Pistone started coming out of hiding. He wrote books about his experiences. Donnie Brasco, My Undercover Life in the Mafia, became a bestseller. He did speaking engagements, consulted on mob-related cases, even consulted on the movie Donnie Brasco with Johnny Depp and Al Pacino. The $500,000 contract is technically still active, but Pistone has said he's not worried. He's trained in security. He's armed. He's careful. And honestly, most of the guys who would have tried to collect that contract are dead or in prison. The mob has bigger problems now than a retired FBI agent from an operation in the 1970s. But still, the contract exists, it's out there. A reminder that Pistone can never fully escape what he did. Other people connected to the operation faced consequences too. FBI agents who worked the case got promotions. The operation was considered a massive success. Careers were made. The prosecutors who tried the cases became prominent. Some became judges, some went into politics, but for the people on the mob side, just destruction, families torn apart, children growing up with fathers in prison, wives becoming widows, associates looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. The Bonanno family itself was in chaos for years. They were kicked off the commission, the board of directors of the Mafia, for a period because they'd been so thoroughly compromised. It took them decades to rebuild their reputation, all because of one FBI agent and a 6-year operation. Think about that. One man, 6 years, took down an entire criminal empire. That's the power of good undercover work. But it's also the cost, because everyone paid a price. The criminals paid with their freedom or their lives. And Pistone paid with his family and his peace of mind. Was it worth it? That's a question only Pistone can answer. And even he probably doesn't know for sure. In 1997, director Mike Newell brought the Donnie Brasco story to the big screen. Johnny Depp played Donnie Brasco. Al Pacino played Lefty. Michael Madsen played Sonny Black. The movie was good, really good. It was well acted, well directed, emotionally powerful. But it wasn't accurate. How could it be? You can't fit 6 years of operation into a 2-hour movie. So let's talk about what the movie got right and what it got wrong. What the movie got right. The relationship between Donnie and Lefty. This is the heart of the movie and the heart of the real story. The film accurately portrays how Lefty took Donnie under his wing, how he taught him the rules, how he treated him like a son. Al Pacino's performance captures Lefty's desperation and loneliness. Johnny Depp captures Pistone's growing attachment and eventual guilt. The seediness of mob life, unlike The Godfather or Goodfellas, which glamorized the mob to some extent. Donnie Brasco shows how unglamorous it really was. The small, dingy social clubs, the endless waiting around, the petty squabbles over money. This was accurate. Most mob life was boring and dirty, the rules and hierarchy. The movie does a good job explaining how the mob works, the importance of being vouched for, the hierarchy of soldiers, captains, and bosses. The code of conduct, while simplified, it's generally accurate. The psychological toll on Pistone. The movie shows Donnie struggling with his double life, his marriage falling apart, his identity crisis. This was real. Pistone really did struggle with these issues. The end, the movie's ending, showing Lefty preparing to be killed and Donnie Pistone dealing with the guilt, is emotionally accurate, even if the specific details differ. What the movie changed or got wrong. The timeline. The movie compresses 6 years into what feels like maybe 18 months. This was necessary for narrative purposes. But it loses the grinding, years-long nature of the operation. Pistone didn't infiltrate the mob quickly. It took years of patient work. Lefty's fate. The movie ends with Lefty walking to what we assume is his death. In reality, Lefty was arrested by the FBI, went to prison, and died of cancer years later. Not as cinematically dramatic, but true. Sonny Black. The movie underplays Sonny Black's importance. In reality, Sonny was arguably more important to the operation than Lefty. Pistone got closer to higher levels of the family through Sonny. But the movie focuses on the Donnie-Lefty relationship, which is more emotionally powerful. The violence. The movie shows some violence, but it tones down the reality. The real mob in the 1970s-80s was incredibly violent. The three captains' murder was much more brutal than suggested in the film. Sonny Black's murder and mutilation isn't shown. The movie sanitizes the violence for a mainstream audience. Pistone's family. The movie shows Pistone's marriage struggling, but it doesn't fully convey how devastating the operation was for his wife and daughters. The real impact was much worse. The other mobsters. The movie focuses on Lefty and Sonny Black, but Pistone met and infiltrated dozens of other mobsters. The movie simplifies this to just a few characters. The Florida operation. The movie briefly touches on Florida, but in reality, the Florida operations were a major part of the infiltration. Pistone spent months down there setting up nightclubs and building connections. The extraction. The movie shows Pistone being pulled out suddenly. In reality, the extraction was planned over weeks and involved an elaborate cover story about Donnie being arrested in California. The aftermath. The movie ends shortly after Pistone is extracted. It doesn't show the years of trials, the $500,000 contract, the witness protection, the divorce, the long-term consequences. Why did Hollywood make these changes? Simple. Movies need to be dramatic and focused. You can't show every detail of a 6-year operation. You need to compress time, combine characters, simplify the plot. The movie focuses on the emotional core, the relationship between Donnie and Lefty, the betrayal, the guilt, the human cost, and in that, the movie succeeds brilliantly. Even if the details are wrong, the emotion is right. What did the movie leave out that's important? The scope. The real Donnie Brasco operation was massive. Over 100 indictments, multiple families affected, years of trials, millions of dollars in illegal revenue disrupted. The movie makes it feel smaller, more personal, which works for drama, but doesn't convey the historical significance. Also, the movie doesn't fully explore Pistone's transformation. The way he became Donnie Brasco psychologically, the way he struggled to remember who Joe Pistone even was. And it doesn't show the impact on the mob, how the Bonannos never fully recovered, how the operation changed, how the FBI does undercover work, how it changed how the mob vets new members. The performances. Johnny Depp is excellent as Donnie Pistone. He captures the character's growing internal conflict, the way he starts to genuinely care about these criminals while knowing he'll betray them. Pacino is phenomenal as Lefty. It's one of his best performances. He makes Lefty sympathetic without excusing his crimes. You feel for Lefty even though you know he's a murderer. Michael Madsen is good as Sonny Black. Though the character is underwritten, the real Sonny was more complex. The supporting cast is solid, but again, many characters are composites or simplified versions of real people. Overall assessment, Donnie Brasco is a great movie. It's emotionally powerful, well-crafted, and based on a true story. But it's not a documentary. It's a dramatization, and like all dramatizations, it sacrifices accuracy for narrative clarity. If you want the real story, you need to read Pistone's books. Listen to his interviews. Look at the court documents. The movie gives you the emotional truth, but not the full factual truth, and that's okay. Movies and reality are different things. The movie honors the spirit of the story, even if it changes the details. But now you know the real story, the full story, the 6-year operation, the psychological toll, the human cost on both sides. And that's something the movie can't fully capture. So what's the legacy of Operation Donnie Brasco? What did it all mean? Let's start with the immediate impact on the Bonanno family. The Bonannos were devastated. They lost over 100 members and associates to indictment and conviction. Their power structure was destroyed, their revenue streams disrupted. The commission kicked them off the board for a while. This was humiliating. It meant they weren't considered equals to the other families. It took them decades to rebuild. Even today, the Bonanno family is considered one of the weaker New York families. One FBI agent did that. One 6-year operation. On FBI undercover operations, the Donnie Brasco operation became the template for how the FBI does deep cover work. The techniques Pistone used, the psychological preparation, the cover story development, the extraction protocols. All of this became standard procedure, but the FBI also learned the costs. They saw what 6 years undercover did to Pistone psychologically, how it destroyed his marriage, how it affected his mental health. Now, deep cover operations are more carefully monitored. Agents are rotated out more frequently. Psychological support is mandatory. Family impact is considered. The FBI learned that you can't keep someone undercover indefinitely without serious consequences. On mob operations, the mob changed how they vet new members. They became more paranoid, more careful about outsiders. The old days of vouching for someone and bringing them in were over. Now, they do more background checks. They watch new guys more carefully. They're slower to trust. This made the mob harder to infiltrate. But it also made them less effective, because paranoia is corrosive. It makes organizations less efficient. On law enforcement broadly, the Donnie Brasco operation showed that organized crime could be defeated. Not just disrupted, but actually taken down through patient, intelligent police work. This inspired other agencies. ATF, local police departments. They all started developing undercover programs modeled on Donnie Brasco. The war on organized crime escalated and largely succeeded. The American Mafia today is a shadow of what it was in the 1970s. The human cost. But let's not forget the human cost, because that's ultimately what this story is about. Benjamin Lefty Ruggiero died poor and alone. A man who'd given his life to the mob, only to be discarded when he became a liability. Dominic Sonny Black Napolitano was murdered and buried in a shallow grave. His hands cut off as a message. Anthony Meera was shot in the head and left in a car. Dozens of other mobsters went to prison. Families were destroyed. Children grew up without fathers. And on the other side, Joe Pistone lost his marriage, lost his relationship with his daughters, spent years in witness protection, developed PTSD and identity issues that he still deals with. His family paid a price they never asked to pay. Was it worth it? That depends on how you measure worth. If you measure it in convictions and crime disruption, then yes, over 100 convictions, a major criminal organization severely damaged. Millions in illegal revenue stopped. If you measure it in human terms, it's more complicated. Lefty Ruggiero was a criminal, a murderer. He chose the life, but he was also a person who died sad and alone. Sonny Black was a murderer. He killed the 3 captains personally. He deserved prison. But did he deserve to be executed and mutilated? And Pistone? He did his job. He served his country. He upheld the law, but he lost his family in the process. These are the moral complexities that the movie touches on, but can't fully explore. Where are the key players now? Joe Pistone is in his 80s now. He lives under his real name. He came out of hiding in the 1990s. He's written several books. He does speaking engagements. He consults on mob-related cases and TV shows. He's remarried. He's reconciled somewhat with his daughters, though the relationships are still strained. He says he doesn't regret the operation. He'd do it again. But you can see in interviews that he carries the weight of it. The guilt, the loss, the $500,000 contract on his life is technically still active. But Pistone isn't worried. Most of the guys who would have tried to collect are dead or in prison. The Bonanno family still exists. It's much weaker than it was in the 1970s. Current membership is estimated at around 100 to 150 made members and associates. Compare that to the hundreds they had in their heyday. They still do some illegal operations. Gambling, loan sharking, some drug trafficking, but they're not the powerhouse they once were. The other families are similarly diminished. The glory days of the American Mafia are over. Law enforcement, RICO statutes, and operations like Donnie Brasco saw to that. Why this story matters. The Donnie Brasco story matters because it's about more than just cops and criminals. It's about identity, about the cost of deception, about friendship and betrayal. It's about how far one person will go to do their job, and what they lose in the process. It's about the moral complexity of undercover work, about how you can fight evil while becoming complicit in it. It's about the human capacity for both loyalty and betrayal. Joe Pistone became Donnie Brasco so completely that he started to forget who Joe Pistone was. He formed genuine friendships with criminals, knowing he'd destroy them. That's the paradox. That's the tragedy. And it's why this story has endured. Why books are written about it. Why movies are made. Why people are still fascinated decades later. Because it's a true story that reads like fiction. A 6-year con that destroyed a criminal empire, but also destroyed lives. The final tally: 6 years undercover, over 100 indictments, dozens of conviction sentences, totaling hundreds of years. One destroyed Mafia family, one destroyed. FBI agents marriage 2 dead mobsters, Lefty and Sonny. In different ways, countless damaged lives on both sides. Was it worth it? Ask Joe Pistone, and he'll say yes. Ask Lefty Ruggiero's family, and they'll say no. Ask the FBI, and they'll point to the convictions. Ask society, and we're still debating. That's the legacy of Operation Donnie Brasco. Not simple, not clean, not black and white, just complicated, messy, human reality. So that's the real story of Donnie Brasco, not the Hollywood version, the truth. A 6-year operation that destroyed a crime family, but also destroyed lives on both sides. Joe Pistone did his job. He did it better than anyone had ever done it before. He infiltrated the Mafia completely. He gathered evidence that put away over 100 criminals. But the price was enormous. Lefty Ruggiero paid with his freedom and his dignity. He died alone, forgotten, broken. Sonny Black paid with his life, murdered and mutilated, buried in a shallow grave for over 20 years. And Pistone? He paid with his family, with his peace of mind, with his identity. He became Donnie Brasco so completely that he's never fully recovered being Joe Pistone. That's the real story. That's what the movie couldn't fully show you. This wasn't a thriller. This was a tragedy. A Greek tragedy, really, where everyone's fate was sealed from the moment Pistone walked into that social club in 1976. Lefty was doomed the moment he vouched for Donnie. Sonny was doomed the moment he trusted him. And Pistone was doomed the moment he became too good at being Donnie Brasco. The operation succeeded brilliantly, but everyone lost something. Some lost everything. If you made it this far, you're part of a rare group who actually wants the truth, not just entertainment. So let me ask you, what shocked you most about the real story? What did the movie leave out that you think people should know? Drop a comment and let me know. I read every single one. And if you want more deep dives into the real stories behind famous mob movies and cases, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because next time, we're going to dive into another incredible true story. Maybe Goodfellas, maybe Casino, maybe something you've never heard of, but needs to be told. The truth is always more interesting than fiction. You just have to be willing to look for it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for caring about the real story. Until next time, stay curious about the truth. Because the truth is what matters. And now you know the truth about Donnie Brasco.